would spend the whole time talking about the pandemic, but I also want to talk about your life and your history. So let's start. And I'm going to ask a question that I just have to ask because I am, in fact, a journalist. As we are speaking, the President of the United States is scheduled to leave the hospital any minute, and he's going to go back to the White House. And I'm not going to ask you to comment on his strange regimen of drugs or how he's feeling. I know you're not his personal physician, and that's not your thing. But I do want to talk about public health, because this afternoon he tweeted, COVID, no big thing. And, 210,000 Americans have died and 7 million have been infected. Is it fair to say no big thing? Don't be afraid of it?
Yeah, well, Michael, that's been one of the things that have been sort of a bone of contention in communication of the seriousness of this. I mean, obviously, it's a very unusual pathogen that can have virtually no effect in the sense of 40%, 45% of people can be without symptoms, but there are a group of individuals who fall into a certain subset or category, namely the elderly and those with underlying conditions at any age, who can have a severe outcome. So when you look at the now 210,000 people in the United States of America who've died, and you talk about the 7 million who've been infected and the 1 million who've died globally, I think anybody who's looking at this realistically has to say that this is a very serious situation.
Not to harp on this, but the president is elderly and he has significant pre-existing conditions. Shouldn't the message about those people be, please take care of yourself? Don't spend 3 days in the hospital, but take care of yourself and rest?
The message should be that we should try as best as we can to avoid infection, no matter who you are, how old you are, or what your underlying condition is. We should not trivialize it.
Well, in all the time I've known you, it seems like you've struggled against one virus or another through many crises, through the AIDS epidemic. I think you changed pretty dramatically during that epidemic. And I'm just going to play this one clip that I think is emblematic of the way you look at the world now. And it happened in 1989, and you were with Marty Delaney, a beloved activist in San Francisco. And he took you on a bit of a tour. And he took you to see a guy who was sick, and this is what happened.
And he looked at me and he said, what kind of a choice is that? You're telling me I should either die or go blind, but I can't do both. And when he said that, I said, oh my God, this is really nuts. And that's when I became a real, almost confrontative activist against my own government that was not allowing these things to happen.
That's when it became clear that I had to be an activist, no matter what the government was saying, that these activists had certain things that they were confronting that I said to myself very clearly, it was unambiguous. I said, if I were in their shoes, I would be doing exactly what they were doing. In fact, maybe even more forcefully. What I felt were unreasonably restrictive regulatory principles, essentially keeping people out of the dialogue, not allowing activists who are almost exclusively young gay men, not allowing them into the discussion about things that were directly impacting their lives and their health. And they had a lot to offer. That scene in the Castro district of San Francisco when Marty brought me into the room of this young man that was going blind from cytomegalovirus infection. And we, the government, had put these restrictions on the clinical trial that would not allow him to get the benefit of a drug that could save his eyesight because he happened to be on a drug that was the only anti-HIV drug. And we were afraid that if we had him on two drugs, that in fact, we wouldn't know the toxicity of the one that we're testing. We put him in a completely impossible situation that he said, you've given me an interesting choice. I could either die or go blind. What the hell is the matter with you guys? And that's when I paused and I said, yeah, what the hell is the matter with us? And particularly when I took the job as the NIAID director, I found myself in the middle of a back-to-back sequence of difficult issues that called more upon my understanding of human nature, or as much, not necessarily more, but as much upon my understanding of human nature than upon my understanding of human physiology.
Speaking of understanding human nature, there was a guy who died this year who was very important to both of us, called both of us murderers at different points in our life, but we ended up both being somewhat close to him. And I wanted to play just one little interaction between you and the person I'm talking about, for those who are out there, is Larry Kramer, who was a signature AIDS activist and a really remarkable person who was both difficult and thrilling at the same time. And I'd like to play an exchange. This is from the 90s when Tony and Larry were on a television talk show together.
I want to say something about Tony Fauci, because I think the world must think I hate him or something, the way I'm going on tonight. I love Tony. Actually, I think I probably have a more complicated relationship with Tony than anybody in my entire life. He is a man, an ordinary man, who is being asked to play God, and he is being punished because he cannot be God. And that is a terrible situation to be in, to be the lightning rod for all of us.
True?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I wouldn't as I'm laughing because I'm just reflecting about that conversation with Larry that we've had, and so many other conversations. Larry would be very theatrical and confrontative, but there was so much wisdom in his words, and to an extent, it was true, because I was put in a position that I was the face of the government, and I was leading the biomedical research effort. And the biomedical research effort could not possibly have moved quickly enough to save so many of the people back then who you and I know and knew, some of whom were very close to me, who were, infected and who died of AIDS before we had the life-saving drugs that we had now, and being asked to do an impossible task. But I had to at least operate in that arena, because that was the only way that we were going to get to where we ultimately did get. The results of that saved Larry's life and had him live into his 80s, which is absolutely remarkable. He's living with HIV, as well as someone who had a liver transplant. He was blasting me for not providing immediate relief for the people he felt he was responsible for. He felt a personal responsibility of saving the gay community from this terrible scourge of HIV/AIDS. And he was furious at anybody who he thought was slowing that process down. And those people often were you and I. He was angry for me at things that I couldn't possibly do. And I think he loved me for things that he knew I was trying so hard to do. That's what I think he meant by a complicated relationship.
Tony, I want to play one more clip. Listen to this, and then maybe you'll remember when you said it.
A pandemic in its full-blown form, it's going to be, as we said, a very, very difficult situation if it happened right now. And if it happens tomorrow in its full-blown form, we're in a big hurt. If you look at the odds are that it's not going to be the overwhelming one. But you can't go on odds when you're trying to prepare a nation. As a responsible nation, you have to prepare for the worst-case scenario.
It was in 2005, and you were talking about the bird flu. And it just seems like this is history that keeps on repeating. Are we going to walk away from this smarter?
Well, I hope so. People often ask me, and I say, you're not going to stop the emergence of a new infection. Nothing we do will stop the emergence. What we can do is prevent the emergence from becoming a pandemic. So that's what we've got to do, to be able to recognize, identify, quickly respond to, so that it doesn't become such a game-changing phenomenon that we're forced to be living through right now.
It looks like we have a long way to go in this pandemic before we go to the movie. Are we ever going to go to the movies again?
Yes, we are, Michael, and I'll even buy you a ticket. We'll go together to alleviate your anxiety. When are we going to get back to something that closely resembles or is, in fact, normal as we knew it? We're already making doses, tens and hundreds of millions of doses, to be ready, first, at least in graded numbers, at the end of the year in November, December. By the time we get to April, we likely will have doses to be able to vaccinate anybody who needs to be vaccinated. But logistically, by the time you get everybody vaccinated, it likely will not be until the third or even the beginning of the fourth quarter of 2021. So let's say we get a 70% effective vaccine, which I hope we will get, but only 60% of the people get vaccinated. There are going to be a lot of vulnerable people out there, which means that the vaccine will greatly help us to pull back a bit on the restrictions that we have now to maintain good public health. But it's not going to eliminate things like mask wearing and avoiding crowds and things like that. So I think we can approach normality, but I don't think we're going to be back to normal until the end of 2021. We may do better than that, I hope so, but I don't think so.
And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and for the New Yorker, and I think really for everyone who's listening and for millions of Americans, because you've done us a tremendous service, and we're really grateful for you being out there. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael, for saying that. I really appreciate it. Thank the New Yorker Festival for having you and me on together again. We've been together through an awful lot. It's always good to be back with my old friend and colleague.
Okay, I'm going to take you up on the movies.
Will do. Will do.